Hello, I'm Max from the Innisfil Idea Lab and Library, and in today's Code Jams session, we're going to learn how to make a dungeon crawling game in MakeCode Arcade. It'll look something like this, and the main functionality is that you will crawl your way through a dungeon and eventually get to an endpoint where you can win the game, essentially. All right, let's get started. So we're using arcade.makecode.com to create the game. And so if you load that up in your web browser of choice, you can just make a new project. I'm going to call this one Dungeon Crawler. Then hit create. And so as a refresher, arcade.makecode.com is a block-based code editor where you compose a game using a series of colorful blocks that store the game data and also organize its logic. And so to start your game, you have a on-start block where you can load your initial data and functionality. First things first, for a dungeon crawling game, we need something to crawl in the dungeon. And so if you hit the sprites drawer on your toolbox here, we can set a MySprite. And so MySprite is just the variable name for your main character in this case, or any sort of character you might make. Leaving it for the default is fine for our purposes. And so set MySprite to sprite. Well, here's a drawing canvas when you click that gray square. So as always, you can draw out a great character, but just in the interest of speed, let's just choose a character. I tended to like the cat for this one, so let's stick to our little fun cat guy here. And then just hit done. So the gallery, of course, has all kinds of things. Choose your favorite, then hit done when you're ready to go. So once your sprite's created, they are present now in an all black void, but nothing happens if you try to move around. And so the next thing to do is to go to the controller drawer and use a move my sprite with buttons block. Again, my sprite was the placeholder name that was automatically generated. It can be any new name you want. Just make sure it matches whatever you decide to move with your buttons, because you want your player to move when you move the controller, most likely. And so we click the little plus arrow here. This is the speed in pixels per second. For our dungeon crawling game, I don't really want the cat to kind of fly around the screen, so I'm going to change this to 60 pixels per second as a starting speed. So now you can see the cat moves a little slower through our dungeon, which I think makes a little bit more sense. To create a dungeon scene, we're going to use a tile map again. And so for our first tile map, I'll just create it in the on start block, but we will change the way that works later. And so tile maps are part of our scene. So we click on the scene drawer and we just look for the set tile map to blank square. And so a blank square tile map is indistinguishable from a black void. So let's click that gray square there. This is where things get kind of exciting. We've seen this in our amazing race code jams video, and this is the same interface, of course. This is the tile map editor. The tile map, in this case, is a set of 16 by 16 blocks, where each block is itself a picture. And I'm going to make it a little smaller than 16 by 16. I want my starting dungeon to be 10 by 8. So by adjusting these numbers here, we change the total size of the tile map. So this is a little bit closer to the size of the screen. For the purpose of today's workshop, I'm just going to make a tile map that's basically the size of the screen you're looking at. It can be bigger, it can be smaller, whatever suits the needs of your game. Last time round, we really stuck in with the forest tile map set of beginning tiles, but we're going to use some dungeon tiles because it's a dungeon crawler we're making. As always, you can make your own tile and draw it out, but again, for today, for now, we're going to use this version of the gallery and use some of the tiles that are built in. So all these little tiles here really help to reference a dungeon. I made a purple dungeon last time. Maybe I'll make a green one this time. And so you can start with the outer walls. You can see there's different types of outer walls. And even in the little tiny kind of collection of tiles here, you can see maybe how they're meant to go together. And so we can choose a corner, choose another corner, choose another corner, choose the last corner, and then just pick any one of these as just to be like the standard wall. You can add some variety. It looks like there's a little cracked wall here and there. That's fun. And then we keep on going with our tile map. So the benefit of the tile map is that you don't have to draw each picture individually each time that you want this thing to be in the scene. You can just click and drag and make your tile map. Even better, if I know what kind of texture I want the floor to be, say this kind of purpley tile here, I can use the paint can just to fill in the floor. So pretty quick floor setup there. Later on in the game, we're going to make a starting tile for our character. I'm going to choose that to be this tile here. So I'm going to put that, whoopsie, let's undo that one. So make sure you switch back to the pen, of course, to put down the individual tile. So this is where I want my character to start in most instances. We're going to maybe, just for like the narrative of the game, we're going to suggest that the character came from this door. So I'm just going to leave this door here. It's not going to do anything, this particular door right now, but it'll just suggest to the player that, you came from somewhere, from the other side of this closed door. Okay, and so if you click done, the tile map appears here, and then it also appears here. So our character right now starts in the middle, which isn't great, but they can float around this tile map. And of course, you see they fly through the walls. We haven't really told the game where walls are yet, so that's probably the next thing we should do. And if we do decide to make a larger tile map, we can use some other functionality in the scene drawer, where we can change how the camera works. So we're just going to make the camera follow my sprite, which is your character. And then in the tile map, we're going to use this little building block tool here, and that'll be to automatically set, or I guess not quite automatic, to manually automatically set where the walls will be in the game. So wherever you set this red wall maker, your game is now telling that your player that you cannot cross it. So you can no longer cross those walls at all, which is good because we want our player to feel trapped in a dungeon. Okay, and so this is a good starting point, a good basic dungeon tile map thing. But of course, we want to go deep into the dungeon. We want to crawl into the dungeon over and over again, lower and lower down. And so there's a few things we're going to do to kind of make that happen. We want to create a series of essentially levels where the player will go down through and get deeper and deeper into the dungeon. And to kind of make part of that faster and easier to work with, first we're going to create a variable that tells the game what level we're currently in. And so under variables, we're going to make a variable. It'll give you a chance to give a name. I'm going to call mine current level. So your current level is where you will start. By default, MakeCode Arcade gives you some starting kind of variable tools. And so set current level to 0 works for us quite well. We're going to set that right after we move our character. So our first level is 0, sure. And then we're going to iterate through the levels as we get deeper and deeper into the dungeon. To make that part easier, for the first time, I think, in this series of videos, we're going to use some advanced functionality and create a function. So we're going to make the function, give it a new name. I'm going to call this function change level. It's what's going to change the level as we go. And we can add different parameters to these functions, meaning that when the function runs, what the function is going to be a block of code that runs when we ask it to run, and it'll do some functionality that we would have to, if we didn't have it in a function, we would otherwise have to put it in our code every single time, like copy pasted, which isn't a good way to do things. So by putting code that we would normally copy and paste into a function, we can do things over and over again with new data and new input. To put something into the function, we establish a parameter. And so I want to put into this change level function the number of the level that I want to change change to. And so we can even give this a name to help us later when we read our code. We want this to be the level number. So now we have a function that will change a level once we put in the code, and that accepts a number, which will be the level we're going to change to. And so we'll click done here, and now we have our function. And so the function on its own really just looks like some of the other blocks you've maybe seen, like this onStart block, but it only runs when we call it. And this is where things just get a little more intense. As we go, we want to add some logic into this function so that it actually changes the level as we go through. Part of the reason why this is necessary is because the way MakeCode Arcade uses the tile map is a little different than maybe it was once upon a time. Once upon a time, you could have just put a placeholder image in here that came from some other source, but now you really just have to only put in the unique drawing. So we're going to use a function to change the whole set tile map thing. We're going to use some logic to step through that. And so in the logic drawer of our toolbox, we're going to look for some if true then, and we're going to maybe make just 3 levels in our game. So if, without one more there. So we're going to do some comparisons to find out what level we happen to be on. So the if statement evaluates when whatever is in the conditional block here is true. So if true is always true, if false is always false. But we can put something there that compares 2 values, and then if the result of that comparison is true, then it'll run whatever is in that last, in that little open area there. So here we go. We need to do yet more, some more logic. And we want to pull in these little diamond guys here that match kind of the diamond here. So if what equals what? Well, we want to see if the level num that we put into the function when we call it later equals a particular number that we want to work with. And so we're going to go to variables and pull out this, the variable we want is right here. So the little level num bubble, we pop right into the 0 there. So if the level num equals 0, that's fine. If that's true, that means it's our first level. So we can put that over there, that very first level. I'm going to duplicate this tile map I made. I'm just going to make edits to it later, just for speed. So right now they're all the same level, which isn't very exciting, but we'll make them different. So then if the level num, we'll just duplicate this little diamond guy here as well. So if that diamond, so if the level num equals 1, if the level num equals 2, and then we can step through our little guy here. And as we'll see, this will really only work for the first level for a number of reasons, but let's just test it out as is. So to call the function, we go back to the functions toolbox and we call the function. So call change level. So the first thing we're going to do is only, call change level 0 to set our current level. And then now things basically ended up as they were. We call change level and ask for the 0 level that we start with here. And then it basically works out as it did before. Not the worst thing in the world, but not too bad. So we want to advance into levels. So now this is kind of maybe the fun part. If drawing is more your thing, this is kind of the fun part. We get to decide how we change levels and how that looks in our screen. So in the dungeon kind of tile map here, I want to find a particular type of tile that I think is here somewhere. Perhaps it's under miscellaneous. Here we go. So to me, this little miscellaneous tile, to me, looks like a hole in a dungeon floor. And so we can use that as part of the narrative of our game. What happens when you fall down a hole? So we put a little hole there. In our next tile map, we're going to do much the same. Go to our miscellaneous tile set. look for our hole, put it somewhere else probably. Maybe there. Then of course, since this is the second level, we should make it look different. Number one, let's get rid of that door, because we're not going to come through the door really in this game. In this version of the game, the character is going to fall through these holes and to get to the next level, so we don't need this door here anymore. Also, it'd be kind of boring if they start in the same place all the time, so let's cover up that little starting pad. But again, I'm going to add that same starting pad somewhere else. You know, for variety, you can add all sorts of things in your dungeon. You can say, you know, maybe there's like a little barrier here. And of course, you need to connect those walls. It's all the dungeon tile maps you can find, wherever they happen to be. There we go. So, you know, a little obstacle to go through. And then same thing with our last one. Miscellaneous tile map. Put a little hole someplace. And then back to dungeon. Put our starting pad somewhere else. Maybe way over here. Get rid of our door. We didn't go through this door anymore. And then fix our floor. So there's only want one landing pad on each level. And then of course, let's mix it up a little bit. Put some walls around here. Okay. Just one more wall left to do. There's a little empty spot here. We can pretend that's kind of like a raised area of the dungeon by using kind of this fun texture here. And so that can make it kind of look like the top of a dungeon wall, perhaps. You see this a lot in tile map based video games like The Legend of Zelda. Not too shabby for us right now. Oh yes, and of course for these tile maps, we need to indicate that these are walls, so the player can't pass them. So let's do that for our last one. Oops. There we go. Okay, so a lot of background work, a lot of fast clicking on drawing, but just to say, all we did really was add a hole in the floor, add some extra walls, and then do the same thing one more time. All right, so as we notice, our player starts in the middle of the screen. In terms of our game design, that's probably not a great idea. We want to control where the player starts so that when we're making our game, we can make it more challenging for the player, knowing where they started from. With that in mind, we want to place your MySprite character in a particular tile. Lucky us, we've been planning ahead this whole time. We have a starting point, a little landing pad here on all our maps. And so we just need to add into our function where that landing pad, where that player is in relation to the landing pad. So back to the scene toolbox, we're going to look for a very special tile called Place My Sprite on top of random blank space. And so the Place My Sprite guy there means that we can place your main character on top of a random tile that we've used in our game. And so all the tiles we used in the game, and some of them that we only just kind of clicked on, are here in this little drop-down menu. So we want to choose our landing pad, and this is why it was important we use the same landing pad everywhere we wanted there to be our character to start from. So place my sprite on top of random landing pad thing. And so when the game reloads, we can see they start right there. So they started kind of like, in the narrative of the game, we can say they started on the other side of this door. They end up here. They don't fall down a hole just yet. And so, of course, as you might have guessed, that's our next challenge. Lucky, lucky, lucky us. In the scene toolbox, in our tool drawer over here, we can look for a type of collision. And so, of course, we used one of these once upon a time in our Amazing Race Tinkercad video from, a few weeks ago. And the same functionality is here for us now. And so on sprite of kind player overlaps whatever tile we choose at location, do something. for us, we know that our player is a player already, which is great, and we want them to overlap our hole. And it's not too tricky, at least hopefully conceptually, what we're going to do here. We're going to repeat what we've done at the start of the game each time they overlap this thing here. And so when the player overlaps a hole, we want to go to a variable and change our current level by 1. So we're increasing our level counter by 1 to go down the level more. And then we're going to call our function. So under functions, we're going to call change level. And we're not going to retype in this number here or anything like that, because we want this to automatically increase as we go. And so we're already increasing this number by 1 just by touching this tile. And so we're going to automatically put that number into the change level function by going back to variables and pulling out the current level variable. So at the beginning of the game, we set our current level to 0. And then we call current level 0 because that's our first level. And then every time you plop on a hole, we're going to change that variable by 1, call the function with our new number, which will be, one of these numbers because there's only, so many holes in the game. And then we'll go down this function and place your character on a new random tile of type, landing pad for us. For a little visual flair, because what's a game without some visual flair? Let's just search in the search box for our shake. Yeah, so camera shake, that would be in the scene toolbox. We're going to shake the screen a little bit, just to kind of make it look like we fell with kind of like a thud, clunk. Shake camera for maybe just 2 pixels for 200 milliseconds, something like that. Anyway, we did a lot of clicking. We don't have that much code, and the reason we don't have that much code is because the call change level here just calls all this code for us just by calling the function by name. Imagine if we had to copy and paste this every time into each time we wanted to do it. It would get a little messy. So let's just quickly test out our game, our cat-tastic game. We have our cat trapped in a dungeon, and then we hit the tile, bloomp. It falls down to the next level, has to get to the little next hole, blump, and then the end here. Of course, if something happens here, the change level doesn't have anywhere else to go. Just goes back to that level there. So, at the very last level of the game, let's make it a little different. Instead of having a hole there, I think in miscellaneous, I happen to see a little kind of like switch type thing, which is pretty fun. So we'll put that switch down there. Lucky us, it kind of matches our floor. And then back in the dungeon tile map, we're going to have a closed door. So maybe you can see where we're going here. We have a switch and a closed door on what is essentially the last level in our game. You can make this level like a boss fight, in your fabulous game. But for us, we're going to try to trigger the switch and make something happen over here. So the tile map editor tells us what tile is currently selected in this little number that'll appear here. So this is tile number 9, 4. So 9 across and 4 down. So we're going to remember those numbers. So tile 9, 4. And we're going to add some additional functionality right at the end of our game. So in the last level, on sprite of kind player overlaps something. So very similarly, in the scene drawer, we're going to look for that same block on the sprite of kind player overlaps well, our brand new switch. And so what's going to happen there? A whole bunch of stuff. So under the scene drawer in our toolbox, we're going to make some kind of very specific changes. Number 1, we're going to set an image at a tile map position. This is where things get kind of funny. Since I've never used the open door graphic, it doesn't even show here at all. So we're just going to quickly select the open door in the direction we want it to be. And then that's it. Just by selecting it, even though we're not going to place it down, pressing done, it'll show up in this list here. So now we have an open door here, thank goodness. So we want to set an open door image at tile map position 9, 4. We can get even fancier if you want, just for the sake of fanciness. So this is position 5, 1, where that switch is. So, just to be fancy, let's duplicate this here just for speed. And then we're going to set that to, you might have guessed, the kind of like down animated version of the switch. So I'm just clicking on here to make it possible to select it later. So that's up, that's down. You can kind of see the small difference there. So set down switch button at, I believe it was 5-1. We'll find out. And then right now, if you notice in our tile map in the last level, that's still a wall. We can't actually get to the door even if it looks open. We need to tell the game in the scene drawer to set the wall off at tile map 9-4. And finally, pretty simple game. Let's just say if we're able to overlap that door, then we just win. So we're going to use one more overlap block. So scene, overlap, zoom out one tick so we can kind of see it all at once. So if your player overlaps an open door, game over, not lose, that'd be very cruel, win with confetti. Sure, that sounds great. Okay, so as always, the work of making a game involves lots of thinking, lots of planning, lots of clicks, but hopefully the payoff is a delightful reward of a game you can actually play. And so let's test it out. I'm going to click the full screen button there. Okay, cat level 1, going through a dungeon. Blonk. You can always add sound effects in the game. I'm making the sound effects with my mouth, which is fine, I guess. Blonk. So here we go, last level. Oh no, I can't escape. Click my little switch, click. And then I can go through my door. Boop. Boop. Yay. So that's the beginning of a kind of dungeon crawler game using a tile map in MakeCode Arcade. I am sure you can think of many interesting examples to build on this type of game. Like, again, maybe the bottom level is a boss fight. Maybe there's enemies all the way through. Or, of course, the rooms you create could be a much larger tile map, which themselves are a maze. Or have some sort of logical series of switches you have to press. Really, it's all up to you. And so I hope you do your best to try to make a game of your own along these lines. The code for this iteration will be on GitHub. I'll put the link up on the screen for us. And so please head there and you can download the game if needed and see how it all works. Thanks so much, and we'll see you soon.